Bitcoin's biggest week. It looks like we're breaking all records, a big weekly candle, and we're going to push through that $100,000. But this week, it's actually not about Bitcoin. It may actually be about ETH, because a lot of people are looking at this ETH pump and going, this is the ETH pump that actually creates the alt season. Yesterday, I did something very, very simple. I went to my Twitter and I asked people, if you were forced to buy either Bitcoin or ETH right now, which one would you buy? And believe it or not, the sentiment seems to have changed, where people are now saying that 65% of people said that they would rather look to buy ETH, which is a great sign if you're into the altcoins. So the big question is it ETH time? Is it altcoin time? Or is it still Bitcoin time? That is what we're going to be discussing today. I've got a massive show for you, two amazing guests. This show is going to blow your mind, I promise you. This is going to be one of the best shows we've ever done. Let's go. Another green day on the bubbles. Just look at these bubbles. You've got Jito up 20%. You've got Eigenlayer up 13%. You've got the alt absolutely running. You've got XRP running. And that's because 𝗕𝗔𝗖𝗞 finally resigned yesterday. His last working day at the SEC will be the 20th of January. And it couldn't have come too soon. In fact, yesterday I actually tweeted and I said, you know what? I think that he made the right decision, but I think he made the right decision 3 years too late. And I think that between him and Elizabeth Warren, they actually cost the Democrats the elections. Anyway, the elections are over. Trump's in power. Bitcoin's pushing all-time highs. I wonder if we'll get that breakthrough, that breakthrough over 100,000. But I think the big story here is ETH, because we finally got a convincing ETH pump with convincing volume. And a lot of people are asking whether this is the beginning of alt season. So I think that is what we're going to be focusing on today. So listen, if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, you know what to do. There's over 1.1 million of us subscribe to this channel. Join the best family in the world, the best community in the world, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you are here and you're enjoying the alpha, just keep destroying the like button. Today, I'm going to blow your mind. I've got two amazing guests. And we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I think a good place to start would be talking about this week, because it has been the biggest week for Bitcoin this year. We have pushed through multiple all-time highs, and of course, we've pushed close to that $100,000 level. I think on that note, I have the honor of being joined by two amazing guests. I've got Tom and Dan with us. Guys, welcome. Good to see you after a month, the most incredible 2 weeks that we've had in Bitcoin. I know we were talking in the waiting room. Were either of you surprised at the Trump win? Did it catch anybody off guard here?
Tom?
Personally, no. We had a pretty big long position going into the election. I have a few tweets that documented why, primarily around the lead up to individual swing state polls, the polls, the way they were trending with young men, and a few individual voting blocks that were super important. I think, unfortunately, folks got very emotional, as they do with every election here. But for folks looking at the data, not just in Polymarket but others, the direction was fairly clear in terms of how the outcome would be. But fortunately for all of us.
Let me ask you a question. So the data was clear, the polls were clear. I backed it, you backed it. I know Dan backed it because he was pretty vocal about it. But what did you expect from Bitcoin if Trump won? Like, did you expect Bitcoin to get to 100K? I mean, I was very public and I said Bitcoin goes to 125,000. Even though I was public about it, I didn't know I would be so euphoric when it actually happened. What were your thoughts, Dan? If Trump came into power, did you see this happening?
So, look, as you said before, I was clear in who I thought would win and why, etc. What I think has happened is it's a structural kind of change that we haven't seen. I think it's even greater and deeper than the change from Carter to Reagan in the early 80s. We've never had, just think about our space. A few weeks ago, you had the US government suing and attacking Coinbase, Kraken, Ripple, everybody out there, the SEC, very heavy-handed. And now, as of yesterday, you just put it up on the screen, the president is having conversations with the Coinbase CEO, Brian Armstrong, about appointments. So I don't think I've ever seen anything go so fast in a 180 direction and so positive for us. We have the richest man in the world who is involved with, who's a crypto guy, who's involved with a president who owns crypto, a vice president who is strong in crypto, the whole cabinet owns crypto, the legislatures own crypto. I think that what's not discounted in the market today is just the extreme nature of the shift. And so I think prices can continue to run. I mean, we've only run 20 or 30%. You say the biggest days ever, that's in dollar terms. But we were, 60,000 all year, basically. And we've only rallied, I guess 40, 50% on what is, and what is an enormous change. The secondary part to this is that when you look around the world, the US is the richest, most powerful government in the world. And it's just changed. Think about Brussels, the European government. Think about, Asia. I don't even know Asia, China, Singapore. No one is near where we are. The US is about to roll over everyone in the blockchain crypto space now. And I don't see how any of these other places around the world get their act together as quickly as we just have. So I think we just got to strap in the seatbelt. Hodlers, hodl, stay there with your Bitcoin and your ETH and, little Solana, and then maybe extend out a little bit. But, the Bitcoin is the core asset. And then I see ETH also having achieved network effect, and now Solana too, probably. So just sit back and be patient.
Gee, what a great message that we've just started. Tom, what you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off that point, the folks who should be most bullish, the crypto native folks in this election, we actually did a survey right before the election of 100 professional allocators. So that's hedge funds and VCs. And we asked them what they thought the peak for Bitcoin this cycle would be. The majority of them, over 50%, said 100 to 150K. And they put the price target of that for the back half of this year. We're going to hit the bottom of that range probably today. So you could see even the people who should be the most bullish were not as bullish as you would expect just reading crypto Twitter. So
yeah, even me. I don't know what your forecast is, but I've been saying for actually the last few years that the initial target in this, and maybe the target, was somewhere like 150 to 170. That was just projections from previous bull phases. And I was sort of, and there was a big list compiled on X, Tom. I don't know if you were on that list, but it was sort of 100,000 up to 1 million. And there were a lot of people bunched around 150 to 250, like, crypto Twitter people. And, I'm more conservative than most of the guys in the space. So I thought 150 to 170 was fair, right? However, we could be in a situation where maybe the US government starts to incentivize people to own crypto. Now, we forget, and I was talking a few days ago on another interview, we forget that purchases across the internet, if you remember in the late 90s and early 2000s, were free of sales tax. The US government, I know the young guys don't remember this so much.
They didn't know how to apply it back then. It was a new industry, and it was a new industry, and they didn't know how to apply it. And so because they didn't know how to apply sales tax, they didn't have sales tax on the internet. And then they quickly got smart and realized how much they were losing in revenue, and then they learned very quickly how to tax it.
It was 10 to 15 years. And it was because people like me, older people, were like, oh, I don't want to put my credit card on the internet. No way. So they used to encourage internet commerce. They were zero sales tax. So instead of walking down to your pharmacy to pick up some toothpaste or something, if you didn't need it immediately, you ordered it online and you saved the 5 to 10% in sales tax. And that went on like that for years and years. I'm just saying, you could do something like that to encourage, people to own crypto.
What do you think the rationale would be for the government encouraging people to use Bitcoin?
I think it would be to bring people's focus to the invention and all the different use cases of Bitcoin and blockchain. And because Bitcoin is the core asset, but then once you venture out, you see how many different interesting projects there are. I think it could be used as a big driver for job creation, I think stable coins are going to be an enormous business. I think security. I have this idea that, and I don't know when we're going to see it, but because blockchains are not, or at least Bitcoin, not hackable, there is a security function that it has to play in the world, and whether it's securing important documents or expensive pieces of art, digital. I still am a big believer in non-fungible tokens. I know that that's sort of taken a back seat to meme coins and some of the other things, but I do believe that all things in the physical world of value will be secured on blockchains. And so you can't even have that view if you don't own a little Bitcoin, right?
So I want to just rewind a little bit, Dan. Sorry, I want to rewind a little bit.
Sorry.
Tom, you mentioned that the majority of people said $100,000 going into, or the top 100 to 150,000 going into the cycle. What do you believe if you did the same survey now? What do you believe that number would be?
Slightly higher, but not much higher. We actually ran the survey back on Twitter, and I think people are still not they're still underestimating what it could mean for sovereign or nation state adoption of Bitcoin and the rotation into other assets that's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. So in that same survey, we did a price target for ETH and Solana, and you saw only 5,000 ETH at the top of the cycle. Solana was much more bullish than 6,000. But you have
Solana
folks who are
6,000 or 600.
Sorry, 600. Yeah. So you're going to have folks who are starting to rotate in those assets, because we're seeing it, I'm sure, in our text messages every day. It's like, hey, I missed this Bitcoin thing, but what's the next Bitcoin? What's the next Bitcoin? And then you see it. I don't know if you guys are on TikTok, but Angela and I were just talking about this before the show, is that, the TikTok crowd is immediately going into what is the next Bitcoin? What's the next meme coin? And this is the new retail. This is like not the people who are going to be on crypto Twitter. They're going to just like try to find the next coin that can go from a cent to $1. And that is the new cohort of money who's going to be rotating into this asset class for the long tail of assets to bring in that quote unquote altcoin season.
But that's not real. Like TikTok and kids playing meme coins, I think that's fine, but it's a very small dollar value at the end of this bull market that is going to really be added. Like institutional money managers are coming. You mentioned sovereigns, corporates. Sailor is out there probably working 20 hours a day now. He must get 7,000 emails a day and requests and this and that. So you have a few of the horses in the space out there really helping with adoption. So yes. I think the TikTok thing and all of that, I think it's a lot of noise. I don't think it's bad noise.
Well, I
just think the dollar value.
I think it's noise. It's noise when you talk about Bitcoin, or it's noise when you talk about ETH. But it's not so much noise when you talk about Sol, and it's not so much noise when you talk about meme coins on Sol. And I mean, those are making retail millionaires, while Bitcoin's probably making
50 billion, 100 billion in value. Yeah. And even if it is, the space now is 4 trillion in value between all the cryptocurrencies and all the equity in the space. So 4 trillion, are meme coins going to be at least even 400 billion of that 10%? No. And there are real things going on now, that are really happening. We shouldn't get too distracted by the kids coming in. Like the stable coin, this cycle, I think, is the stable coin adoption cycle. I don't know, Tom, if you have a view on
I think so. There's a barbell for me. It takes a lot of money now to move Bitcoin and Ethereum because of how large they are in terms of an asset class and how much weight it takes. So that's the institutional side. That's the side that we should be excited about for stable coins and other real adoption technologies. And if I'm the US government and others, to your point earlier, Rand, why I would be excited about it is you can actually proliferate the US debt and US dollar via stablecoins. We know USDC and all these others are huge holders of government treasuries. Now, on the other side, it's the attention economy. And that's what meme coins are tokenized attention. So it may be 99% BS, but guess what? You're going to have the folks who want to get into the space. That's probably their first foray, just like the first foray for a lot of us may have been like when Bitcoin was sort of a meme coin, right? It's the speculation aspect that gets you in and the tech that gets you to stay.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate that point. So if you look at the institutional demand, so this is the ETFs. We're over $100 billion in NAV for the Bitcoin ETFs, which is a big number. At the same time, Dan, you mentioned that you got MicroStrategy over trading. They have over they traded over 100 billion in market. Yesterday in market cap, which was which was huge. This is the annual candle for MicroStrategy. Someone called this the infinite money glitch. Another person called this, how can this not be a scam? Michael Saylor just keeps buying Bitcoin to increase his share, therefore his share price increases, and therefore he can issue more equity to buy more Bitcoin. Therefore he buys the Bitcoin and increases his share price, and he just keeps looping the thing. On a serious note though, is there any downside to MicroStrategy buying so much Bitcoin, to so much Bitcoin being housed up in one leverage strategy?
Of course there's downside. There's always downside in any investment. But what he's doing is he's exchanging. So he is not, I wouldn't say abusing, but he is tapping into the ability, his own ability, to issue debt and essentially borrow money from the fiat world and buy something which has an infinite supply. So he's borrowing something that has an infinite supply, and he's buying something that has a finite supply. So over time, so over 5 years, 10 years, there's almost no way that he won't win. Okay. However, in the interim, as we know, after this bull phase, whatever number it hits, we're going to have a bear phase, and we're going to have a 70% correction again, just like we do after every bull phase. And then we'll have another big run. And he is very long-term. I was actually very impressed. I heard him saying recently that he's going to leave all of his wealth to humanity. He has no children. He's not married. I thought that was very interesting, that this entire project...
I have a friend called Humanity. I mean, he could meet her and maybe...
Okay, all right.
This reminds me of the human
whatever that
from
means,
Seinfeld.
to charity, to the organization. No, I think to organizations that promote Bitcoin and the philosophy behind Bitcoin. He's quite a philosophical guy. And so, free market, Bitcoin is a free market, capitalism. I think you can weave some moral truths also from Bitcoin. So I don't know exactly what he means by that, but I think it's pretty impressive. He's not necessarily, he obviously has an ego, and maybe this feeds that a little bit, but he's actually, in a way doing this for the community. You know what I'm saying?
He has nothing. Yeah, he has nothing. He's not taking anything. He's not taking anything with him. I want to just shift the attention for 1 second. So we have $100 billion that is now the AUM of the Bitcoin ETF. But if you contrast that with the ETH ETF, the ETH ETF is a $9 billion NAV under management with the ETFs, right? And when I look at the market cap of Bitcoin relative to the market cap of ETH, the market cap of Bitcoin is, I don't know, 1.9 trillion, 1.8 trillion. And you got the market cap of ETH at 400 trillion.
400. Yeah.
My logic says that the net asset value inside the ETFs should be proportionate, more or less. In other words, that if there's, if the Bitcoin NAV is 4 times the size of the Bitcoin market cap is 4 times the size of the ETH market cap, then ETH should have 25% of its ETF inflows, very simplistically, which means that ETH is about 2.5 times undervalued. What's the flaw in my logic here? Is there a flaw in my logic?
I don't think there's a flaw in your logic. I think the really simple problem is distribution for the ETH ETFs have been severely constrained compared to the Bitcoin ETFs. You can't even buy the Bitcoin ETFs right now. If for Merrill Lynch, Vanguard, and a few of the other major brokerage houses, it's even worse for the ETH ETFs. And there are...
why is that? Are they just internal restrictions?
I don't know. Internal restrictions, and then the additional layer you have of RIAs actually most RIAs not being able to sell these things or market them to their clients yet. They're way down that path with Bitcoin. They're much less down that path with Ethereum. And I've always thought, coming from TradFi, Dan, you probably echo this sentiment, is that ETH is like catnip for TradFi. There are just so many clear analogies. Yeah. Internet bonds.
They're gonna love it. Like, it's crazy. They don't even know how much they're gonna like it, right? They don't even particularly like gold. I know, the TradFi people. So when they figure out what is going on in ETH, you're right. It's
so. Would you say? Would you declare this ETH BTC bottom? Like with all that you know, the catch-up trade that needs to happen between ETH and Bitcoin, the fact that Bitcoin's had a run, ETH hasn't even moved. I mean, would you say that this...
Well, it popped today a little bit, didn't it? I think ETH is up 7% and Bitcoin's up 3%.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard days where ETH's outperformed Bitcoin, but I've always been disappointed. I feel like an abused. They're
both going up. I don't know why people on Twitter are so into this. Just they're both going up. One is lagging the other at the moment, right? Let's not make things hard. So what if Solana is outperforming ETH? Like, who cares? It's all fine.
Who cares?
It's a lot of optics too, right? So you went back to Saylor before. Like, what's the downside of Saylor doing this? It's that he's become now like the chief evangelist for Bitcoin. So if you have something that happens to Saylor, whatever it may be, like some scandal comes out, like immediately that reflects on Bitcoin, and he's become like the Bitcoin god, Jesus. Like if you look at Ethereum, they've really had is Vitalik, who's sort of an interesting fellow, and then you've had like guys like Justin Drake who are super technical, coming out with these long roadmaps. And the story for ETH in people's minds and Twitter is like just all jumbled. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
We're having so it's very clear for Bitcoin, very muddled for ETH, and then Solana has this very clear North Star of decentralized NASDAQ. So ETH just sits in this weird phase right now where it needs a new narrative, new attention. And I think a lot of that's really going to come through TradFi and institutional adoption.
Yeah, but Tom, if you step back and you look 5 years ago, I mean, it was trading at $100 or, in 4 or 5 years ago. It's at 3,000. Like what is wrong with that?
I mean, that is true. That is true. That
30x. 4 or 5 years ago, Bitcoin was, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000. So it's 10x. I mean, it's also, if you look at the charts, right? Actually, ETH is probably outperformed, but like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Each one of these core assets, these 3 core assets, have a special purpose and use case. And it shouldn't be about like, which one's going to outperform this and that. If you're a trader that's trading the ticks, for your daily trade or something, maybe it matters, but that is not the way to build wealth in this space, right? I think you own all 3 at this point, Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana. And to me,
in what ratio? But in what ratio would you own?
I think it's 65. I still think it's 65, 30 or something like 60, 30, 10 or something like that.
Tom, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we're positioned 30% or 33%, 33%. So much bad. More in terms of the outperformance in altcoins this cycle. Now, I think there's a lot of room to run for both Ethereum and Bitcoin, but or Ethereum and Solana, where the frustration comes in, I think, Dan, is that looking from the last cycle peak, and a lot of the people who are here today joined that cycle, is that Bitcoin is up 50% or so, close to it, actually maybe more, and Ethereum is still down from 4,800.
Yeah, but it may be underperforming now, but if you stretch back a little longer, like go back to Q1 19, Bitcoin's low and ETH's low. That was Bitcoin was, I think, 4,000. And I think ETH was around 100. I think it traded under 100 briefly.
It's 83 or 87 or something. I remember.
It's done. I'm just saying, you zoom out a little bit, and it's just done fine. It's just in the last cycle in 21, maybe ETH just got out a little too far over its skis, and it's all going to be fine here. I know there's frustration, but I feel like there's so much bounty. We have so much to be grateful for on this Thanksgiving period. And, going back and forth on an extra 10 or 20 or 30%, one versus the other, is just not, to me, it's just missing the forest through the tree. But I like your allocation. Like, I think that's a decent way. I don't know what you think about the other things. I think the other things are venture projects. To me, they haven't achieved network effect yet, right? Like 𝗬𝗎 is still in the making, right?
Down this morning. When this airs tomorrow, you'll have the resolution. I think it was down for 2 hours this morning. Yeah, there are a few alt L1s that are interesting, like Near with the sort of AI play, blockchain operating system, interesting. 𝗬𝗎 versus Aptos, interesting. But the L1 trade in my mind is really almost sold at this point, right? Like all block space that we're selling on each individual one of these ledgers is compressing to zero in terms of fees. And then at that point, what do you have? You have the sort of digital record that you want to use as an organization. What are you going to want to use? You're going to want something with the economic weight and lendiness like an Ethereum or a Bitcoin or emerging Solana. Are you going to want to use one of these new chains? Probably not, which is why I think that trade is really dead. It's really big L1s now on one end of the barbell, and then venture investments really on the other. And then, looking at some of these individual sectors like DePen and others we've talked about ad nauseum.
So
in terms of allocations on the liquid side.
I have a slightly different view here, and I'll tell you. I mean, I do think I share your view that the L1 trade is probably solved. So, whether you solve it using Solana, whether you solve it using 𝗬𝗎, whether you solve it using Near, whether you solve it using Base, which is a derivative of optimism. I think that the layer one transaction, we're at a point now where we can scale infinitely at a very low number. So I think that's solved. I think what's not solved yet is the next layer, because my thesis is blockchain is about creating digital value that can be traded across the globe in a matter of seconds. That's what blockchain is.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And so now we've completely solved the base layer thing. I think it comes down to two layers around that. The first layer is spot trading. And I don't think that spot trading is solved. I don't think that Uniswap is a great experience. I don't think that Raydium is an incredible experience for normies. I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
You mean on chain? On chain,
yeah. Because I think centralized exchanges are great, but that's not why we're in blockchain. Blockchain is a decentralized world. And so for me, the two places that I want to spend a lot of money investing in now are decentralized exchanges, and even more than that, decentralized perpetuals exchanges. Why? Because in the traditional world, perps are always bigger and make more money than spot trading, right? And so I want to be in the best perps. But when I look at the market, and I'll show you something quite interesting, if I take the biggest DEX on Solana, which is Jupiter, or let's call it Raydium, because Jupiter is more of an aggregator. Let's just call it Raydium for shits and giggles. The fully diluted valuation on Raydium is 3.3 billion, right? If I look at Drift, which is the biggest derivatives exchange on Solana, which in my mind should be bigger because derivatives exchanges do more volume, make more fees, it's got 1/3 of the valuation. To me, there's a mispricing between derivatives.
I like that trade.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, because if you look at perpetuals, they're pricing in speculation almost directly, because you can't hold those trades for very long, depending on what the funding rate is. What I think is actually the most underserved market now is options markets. If you look at traditional finance, you have options markets roughly the same size or even bigger than spot markets.
Yeah,
and that's primarily because of hedging.
So I love 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏.
I love 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. There are sponsors, there are partners, but it's a one-horse race. And as much as I love 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏, I would love to see some real competition in the derivative space.
I think they would too, just to have other sources of,
And they're only European options. We don't have any American options really that you can use, which is the majority of options.
Yeah. So
I agree with your view there.
Yeah. So for me, the most mispriced category in this market is the perpetuals, decentralized perpetuals. Right now, for me, that's the biggest gaping hole here. Whether you're trading decentralized perpetuals on memes, whether you're trading decentralized perpetuals on any value that is created, the perpetuals market and the options market is going to be the biggest. And to me, I haven't seen any. I mean, I'm in Drift and I'm in a couple of others, but I haven't seen a good entry point into any options, unless you got into 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏 really early in the equity rounds when they were doing the raise. There hasn't been any other viable options strategy. So for me, what I'm saying now is my strategy in this cycle is to try and build, just like I built an L1 portfolio of Bitcoin, ETH, Solana in the previous cycles, I want to try and build the second and third layer. But specifically because of the mispricing between the second and third layer, I'm going to go straight to the third layer and deploy more on the third layer. Because right now the market isn't getting it, I think.
I think that's right. One other thing connected to that, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt, though. I think that people figuring out the wrapped Bitcoin problem is connected a little bit to that. Like, I think that US DeFi potentially is going to explode. When you asked me, like, what areas could be incentivized, I mean, US DeFi was something that did exist a little bit and then basically completely shut down. And I think the ability to move your Bitcoin around, you know, on ETH or on Solana is still difficult. And with the BitGo wrap Bitcoin issue with Justin and all of that, I've actually have a company that we operate that is it's called ZenRock. In December, we're going to roll out ZenBTC, which is a decentralized yield-bearing wrap Bitcoin product. And, you know, that company has spent 4.5 years building, you know, an MPC tech. And, you know, we've spent the entire year plus, building this product, and we're rolling it out in December. And our early sense is that there's huge demand, and the TAM for a wrap Bitcoin, or I think, is enormous. There's only, I don't know, what is it, 15 billion or something like that?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. So, talking about wrap Bitcoin and DeFi. You know, Trump's got a DeFi project. Well, the Trump family has a DeFi project. I mean, how much do you think how much do you think they'll focus on bringing DeFi back to the United States to actually try and, or am I drinking Kool-Aid? Tom, let me know what you think here.
I mean, Trump, for all the positive things he brings to the industry, I think we need to be very eyes wide open about him being an uber capitalist and doing what's in his best interest. And in his best interest, in this case, is launching something that could have a huge speculative value. I don't really think he's going to be doing anything directly for DeFi. Now, what we can ascertain from his previous views is that he will do everything to reduce regulation so he and others can make a profit. And that's where the value is for DeFi and others. So I'm thinking, you know, my view is they're going to remove a lot of roadblocks rather than put a lot of crypto legislation directly for DeFi. I don't know if you,
agree. They're going to remove a lot of roadblocks. I mean, that's when I say incentivize, that also means that, right?
Okay. Let me take it down.
If you're going to have a framework that is clear, like, there's no clear DeFi framework really anywhere. So you can imagine maybe all the devs and everybody else just get sucked into the US, right?
I just get a feeling that these guys are going to run the US like a nimble startup. Like, when I look at this photo and I just look at
look at that photo a little closer.
You got Vivek, you got Elon, you got RFK. You got Nikki Haley, you got Trump Jr. I just get the feeling the US is about to be run like a startup again, which makes me so excited. And like, I saw something today, and I'm gonna play it for you guys. I wasn't planning on showing it, but I want to show it to you because I just felt that this just struck a chord. I'm gonna play this for you. I know you guys will enjoy it. It was a tweet from Elon. Tom, go for it, Tom.
While you're pulling it up, just on the boots on the ground knowledge. So we're primarily pre-seed and seed investors, so very early stage companies. We have 200 plus investments we've invested in the past 6 years in that stage, and almost across the board from our founders, you're seeing direct vocal sentiment for, hey, I'm ready to move back to the US, or hey, I'm ready to open operations in the US, and or hey, I'm less worried about getting arrested if I come to the US for a conference. So it's like instant, night and day, like immediate.
Night and day.
I mean, I must say, I left the US because of I moved to the US, and I actually left the US because I just felt that it was too bureaucratic, too many rules, too anti-crypto. And I felt very unsafe operating there. And I must say, for the first time in many years, I've actually thought, okay, I actually want to come back. Like, I actually want to give it another go.
Think about how much money, Rand, think how much money is on the sidelines that has zero exposure. I mean, so Tom and I have probably no overlap at all. I'm doing more growth, except for this ZenRock, ZenBTC early, this project. We're in the growth equity names in the space. And so we own, as I said, Deribit and Kraken and Animoca and the larger companies. But listen, they, for the last 2 to 3 years, have spent the time globalizing. Gemini, which we own, opened an office in the UK, went out to India. I can go through the list of all of our companies, and I'm talking about companies that really are thinking about listing, okay, that have equity over the next 2 years. And the U.S. was a non-starter. All of a sudden, they're all talking about it because it is very possible that NASDAQ decides it's time to have more than 3 large crypto blockchain public companies. We got Coinbase. Now we have MicroStrategy, which is not necessarily an operating business. And then we have Galaxy, which is smaller. But, we're going to have Circle. We're going to have eToro.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. It's
amazing, right? So it's everyone is thinking like we're all going to come back.
So I want to play this for you guys. I just in the spirit of startup, this is what Elon posted, and it's around Milton Friedman. It's an interview.
Keep it. Department of Education.
So they're talking about which departments to keep.
Keep them or abolish them. Department of Agriculture.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Commerce.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Defense.
Keep.
Keep it. Department of Education.
This is the original
Gone.
British, right?
Energy.
Abolish.
How?
Except that energy ties in with the military.
Well, then we shove it under defense.
That's
the little
right.
bit that handles the nuclear,
right? That ought to go under
plutonium
defense.
and so forth goes under defense, but we abolish the rest of it. Health and Human Services.
There is room for some public health activities to prevent contagion, such a thing as, for example.
So you'd keep the National Institutes of Health, say, and the Center for Disease Control down in Atlanta?
No, not the National Institute.
Oh, no?
Those are mostly research agencies. No. That's a question of whether the government should be involved in financing research.
And the answer is no.
Well, that's a very complicated issue, and it's not an easy answer with respect to that.
We'll eliminate half of the Department of Health and Human Services?
Like that.
Okay, 1/2. There we go. Housing and Urban Development?
Out.
Oh, didn't even pause over that one. Department of the Interior?
Oh, well, but housing and urban development has done an enormous amount of harm. My God. If you think of the way in which they've destroyed parts of cities under the rubric of eliminating slums.
Jack Kemp.
You
So I mean, that was the original Doge, and I mean, I just feel that we're going to go back there. I want to take you down the same road and talk about this strategic reserve that Trump spoke about, and that it seems like maybe at some point becoming a reality. So, I mean, question number 1 is, do you think that it is going to be a reality? And number 2, if it is a reality, is there a world where the US builds up a Bitcoin strategic reserve and then everybody else follows it? And when everybody else follows it, the price of Bitcoin goes up. And as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the asset goes up on their books. And then all of a sudden, they've got some kind of collateral, like a gold type collateral to back their debt.
Well, El Salvador's already done it, right? Look at those guys. They're sitting pretty now.
$570 billion, $570 million as of this morning.
I think it depends on if you could do this without a congressional action, which it seems you may be able to, depending on who we have in some of the key positions. Now, I think what's actually more important is the fact that we're moving this direction, because it means others are going to start to try to front run the US as soon as this becomes a conversation. So you have the bill by Senator Lummis, which has actually already been proposed. I think it's pretty unlikely to get through, but if we can do it by those other means, and now that it's in the lexicon, I think other countries you're going to see start purchasing Bitcoin.
Help me understand this. Help me understand why you think it won't be passed if the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. To me, it feels like they can do whatever they want. But I'm not really familiar with the U.S. political system. So, I mean, can they not do whatever they want?
Listen, this would come under the reserves of the central bank, and the central banker decides how they want to hold the reserves. So the Fed holds treasuries, they hold gold. There are other central banks around the world, not the Fed so much, that own equity. I mean, we know that the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund and the Swiss National Bank all own U.S. equity in NASDAQ. So I think, honestly, like, you can't put too fine a point on these things. I think whether we have a national reserve or whether we have Saylor doing it, like Saylor's sort of doing what he suggests the U.S. government should be doing, issuing debt and then buying Bitcoin. Yeah. I think it's all happening over the next few years. And so whether, it happens this year or next year, or whether it's the U.S. or another government, it's all part of this trend, right?
I suppose.
This is the trend of the future.
Tom, what do you think?
I think we're going to get some large nation state purchases of Bitcoin outside of the U.S. I think the U.S. is likely to hold the Bitcoin.
The Arabs, the Middle East.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you're going to see these enormous buys. You're going to just see some days where Bitcoin just spikes up and everyone's going to just say why. And it's because someone just has an enormous TWAP order for purchasing Bitcoin. So, and actually, there's a counter argument that actually U.S. purchasing Bitcoin is sort of not a great thing. So I don't know if I am on board that purchasing huge reserves makes sense. And the reason that is because it's sort of like saying the quiet part out loud. It's saying like, hey, our deficit's somewhat unsustainable. Like Loumis's whole thing is that she wants to pay off some of the US debt with Bitcoin. And it's like, well, okay, we have to print money to do that. And you're sort of getting in this weird feedback loop that, may not make sense. So I think it's almost better other countries do it.
I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I think it's a good thing. We should have the most important asset, the pristine collateral for the whole system eventually. I do think we should own some, and we need to dip our toe in. And I don't think the dollar is threatened or the deficit is. Look, I remember there was a book in the late 80s, that came out. I forgot the guy's name. And it was called like Rude Awakening. And it was a panic about how the deficit was going to end the United States. I read that book, or some portion of it, in 1988, that Reagan, because of Star Wars, had blown out the government deficit. That was the wrongest, dumbest thing ever. And it continues to be the wrongest, dumbest thing. Now, I think it would be great to cut back on the deficit. And I think that DOGE, the Department of, Government efficiency is a great idea. And I think we could be more efficient and be more productive, but there is no country, there's no other currency that is going to usurp the dollar in the fiat realm. And so there are 50 currencies that will go to zero before the dollar. So I don't think we have any risk or any fear of that. And I'd love to see the US take the charge here, build a reserve, forget about what it does on the price. This could be the blockchain area, the digitization of all value area. Look, this should be something that we are the leaders in, that we are dominant. It's just like in the early 1980s, there was no mortgage-backed market in the world. The mortgage-backed market didn't start up in El Salvador or Canada or some other place. It was an innovation. You can say whether it's good or bad or not, it's your, whatever view, that happened at Salomon Brothers. And a lot of the financial innovation that happened in the 80s happened here. Some ended up happening in London as well. But the bottom line is this was an easy one. And why the people at the top have been so resistant is just mind-boggling. I said it in my 2019 interview that I did with Raoul Pal. It's like, I don't understand. Like, why this is one of the great inventions of the last 50 years. Why would we be so negative? So finally, we're not so negative. And finally, we've made a 180-degree turn. And the rest of the world is still, nowhere.
This could have been a very different conversation if Kamala came into power. Let me tell you that.
Okay, but who cares?
Yeah, but elections have consequences. As Obama said in 2008, elections have consequences. And the consequences for this election are that pro-crypto candidates did not get elected and lost elections in mass. If you look at standwithcrypto.org, 276 of the House of Representatives are pro-crypto candidates. 20 out of the 32 senators that were elected are pro-crypto candidates. So direct dollars are now being funneled into these candidates who are pro-crypto. And the crypto pack that we have today is going to be funneling a lot of money into the midterms and everything going forward. So this is going to be a core issue, and there's really no sense in being on the other side of this. And this is what everyone has said for a long time. Like, what's the point of an anti-crypto army if, for Elizabeth Warren and others, people don't care? And, it's just like, it's not an issue that you.
Well, people do care. People do care.
The future is going to swallow the past. That's what's going on. okay? Because the value that's being built in the digital asset ecosystem, all the crypto, that's 3 trillion, all the equity of the crypto blockchain companies, another trillion, it's $4 trillion, you know, and the energy behind that, the average age of people in that world, the number of use cases that have just kicked off. You know, what was it? Andreessen said, software is going to eat the world. Okay. Right now, crypto, blockchain, digital assets, Web3, whatever you want to call it, okay, is going to eat the world. And it is eating the world slowly. And it's not something to be feared. It's something to embrace, because it's a massive wealth builder for all who are involved.
I love that. But it would have been a great point to end on. But in the beginning of the show, in the waiting room, you said to me, you have a view about meme coins. And I asked you what your view was, and you said, no, you have to wait until the show. So,
you want to end on a meme coin thing?
I want to end on a meme coin thing, because I want to get your views on what these meme coins actually are, and whether you like them and whether you hate them.
Right. Okay. Well, we talk. It's a little bit, it's for the TikTok crew, and it's a nice little fun game and community they can belong with. But I think the use and the reason why meme coins are producing and doing something valuable is that, they're issuing, I don't know, whatever it is, 10, 20,000 meme coins a day. I think that the ability of, this is mostly Solana, to manage the traffic. These are like rails, railroad tracks that are being put down, okay? And I think that what Solana is showing is that a nearly infinite amount of activity can be run across these rails. So it's like practicing. You've got hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars in the traditional world that gets moved around, right? SWIFT, between banks, all of that crap. All of that money is not going to move into the blockchain space onto rails that have not been tested. So I like this idea that the meme coin transaction number, which has exploded, is just practice for when it's testing of the rails. It's like practice to show the old world, like, hey, these rails really do work. You can run an infinite amount of stuff on them. There's instantaneous settlement. Yes, meme coins are kind of fun and silly and whatever and gamified, but the rails do work.
I have a very similar theory to you. First of all, when I started off in meme coins, that was exactly my theory. We just need to prove that in a world, in an industry where you can create digital value, that we can create insane amounts and trade insane amounts of this digital value. But then it became for me a lot more, and I'll explain it to you in two phases. So the first phase was an attention economy and the biggest casino in the world. It's the biggest roulette wheel in the world, right?
I like that.
We've created a game, and the game is roulette, and it's the biggest roulette game in the world. And you can place your bets deciding on whether attention is gonna be next. And that was amazing for me. But then I even took that one step further, and I said, hold on a second. If you look at the brands that have been created out of these meme coins in a short amount of time, like if you take, let's just take dog with hat, okay? That meme is what, a year old, more or less? And if you think of the brand equity that meme has built in a period of less than a year, memes have created the ability to create real world brands with huge brand affinity really, really, really quickly. There's very few brands in the real world that can create as much affinity. Now you analyze the reasons why. One is, if done correctly, the meme coin makes lots of millionaires. It starts off small and it goes up big, which is why Bitcoin built its brand value, because it started off small and it went up big. Every time you make money, you get a feedback loop in your brain which says, I'm a genius and WIF is the best coin in the world. And that releases two hormones. One of them is dopamine, which gets you more excited. And the other one is oxytocin, which makes you more connected. And so we've created a machine that allows us to create real world brands much quicker than anything else. So let me take it even one step further. If I were going to launch a clothing brand today out of scratch, and I had an ability to either launch a clothing brand first, or to launch a meme coin first, and then to launch a clothing brand around the meme coin, I go for option B, 10 out of 10 times. If I was going to launch a shoe brand, I would launch, or a coffee shop brand, I would first launch the meme coin. I would get mass distribution with mass dopamine and mass oxytocin and mass people euphoria around the meme coin, and then I would franchise that as a coffee shop. And so I think we've created a brand-making machine.
By the way, Ran. That's a great idea. And that may be the wave of the future, that every brand, before it launches or as it launches or wants to drive greater attention, like we're doing that with ZenRock. We've got a rock token and we've got a whole meme community. We went from 100 people to 35,000 on our Telegram chat in the span of a few months. And like they memified this whole thing with Zenguard and cartoon characters and all of this stuff. So I think there really is something there. Yeah. You're right.
I love both those points. Just one last point to end on is it reduces the feedback loops, which is enormously important and critical to crypto, and meme coins do that to like the nth degree, right? And there's a big difference between fart coin and the new AI coins that are launching. Those actually could have some utility. The feedback loops are very fast there, and we can actually iterate and see some really cool things.
Amazing. Listen, on that note, what an alpha pack show. Love you guys. Thank you so much for coming on. Tom, I know you're staying with our front runners in the Discord later, so thank you very much for making some time available for our VIPs. To you guys, before I let you go, I know based on what you've heard now, you know you're going to make life-changing money in this cycle, right? And that's just part of the game. The first part is to make the life-changing money, and the next part is to keep the life-changing money, right? To keep the life-changing money, to make the life-changing money, all you have to do is watch more shows like this and then just act on what you heard here. To keep the life-changing money, it's a little bit more of a challenge because you have to do two things. The first thing you have to do, you have to sell your tokens on time and take profits, and we'll guide you through that. The next thing that you got to do is you got to make sure you don't get hacked. Because if you get hacked, if you make money and then you land up getting hacked, that's it. That's the end of your life-changing money and all your hard work. Now, one of the things that you need to do to avoid yourself getting hacked is you got to get a VPN. There's two reasons why you got to get a VPN. The first reason is it masks your IP address, which means that you can trade anywhere in the world because no one knows where the hell you are. But I didn't tell you that, right? The second reason you want to mask your IP address is because you don't want governments getting reports from exchanges as to which country you live in, right? So all you do is you get a VPN and you change the country that you come from. And the third reason why you need it is because NordVPN, who is our sponsor of these Friday Banters, actually has this thing called Threat Protect. And that will protect you from going to malicious websites and getting hacked. Now, there is a Black Friday special, right? So you go to the link below, there's a Black Friday special, click on the link, you will get a Black Friday special. This is the cheapest NordVPN's ever gonna be. Just take it, save your money. They are our sponsors, they look after a whole lot of crypto people. They will look after you. I specifically left it today for the end of the show so that now you can leave the stream and you can click on the NordVPN link below. I'm gonna wait while you do it. So simple, all you do, you go like that, you go to the link below, you click on the NordVPN link, and you get the Black Friday special. On that note, I will see you guys again on Monday. Until then, trade well, my friends.